I am Vaibhav Srivastav from Vaibhav E-Learning Academy. Today we are going to start a new topic in biology, that is anatomy of flowering plants. This is our part number 1. In today's video we will be discussing about tissues, types of tissues, simple tissues, complex tissues and tissue system. Now in tissue system we will be having 3 types of tissues. One is epidermis, one is ground and one is vascular. So these are the topics which we will be covering in today's video. So let us start. First one, anatomy of flowering plants. In many videos I have said what is the meaning of anatomy. Anatomy means the study of internal structure of an organism. In anatomy of flowering plants, as the name suggests, we will be discussing about the anatomy of flowering plants. Which are the flowering plants? The flowering plants are angiosperms. So we will be discussing mostly about angiosperms, and in some topics in these there are some exceptions which are found in angiosperms but not found in gymnosperms. We will be discussing which things are found in angiosperms, which things are found in gymnosperms, and we know that evolution is from gymnosperms to angiosperms. So we have learnt about the 4 groups, that is bryophytes, pteridophytes and algae and gymnosperms. Those are in a separate video, that is plant kingdom. So in today's video we will be discussing about mostly angiosperms. So let us start. So first one, we will be discussing about what is a tissue. Now we all know from starting that tissues are a group of cells, similar structure, similar function, performing, and they are originated from the same origin also. But there is one difference this time. What are tissues? A group of cells, similar in origin and performing a similar function is called tissue. A group of cells similar in origin and performing a similar function is called tissue. Now, for example, let us take one organ. For example, heart. Now, heart is an organ which is made up of many different types of tissues, and the tissues are made up of many different types of cells. So, the cells of heart are known as heart cells, for example. Now, as the heart is made up of tissue and tissues are made up of cell, then are the cells capable of performing the function of a heart? No. Similarly, are cardiac tissues able to perform the function of heart? No. But a group of tissues combined together perform the function of the heart. So that is why we say that, even one more point, that is they are similar in origin, we know, performing a similar function. So they collectively perform a single function, that is for in case of the heart. So here we are not talking about the similar structure. Why? Because let us take an example. Now let us take xylem. So we know that xylem are made up of 4 types of cells. One is xylem parenchyma, fiber, tracheids and vessel. We will be discussing this in this video. But we know that the 4 of these elements, these are not similar in structure. One of them is tube-like, one of them is circular and stores food, one of them is dead. So they are different types of tissues. But what is their function? Their function is one function, that is transporting the water from root to the different parts of the plant. So here tissues mean that they are similar in origin, but they may or may not. Here one more point. The cells may or may not be similar in structure. So this was all about tissues. Now in plants, tissues are of 2 different types. When the plant is in embryonic stage, that is when it is not developed. So in embryonic stage, all the cells are meristematic. Now we should understand the term meristematic. What is meristematic? Meristematic cells are the cells which actively divide. These cells actively divide and form new cells. they are highly metabolically active. They have a dense cytoplasm. So meristematic cells, which are actively dividing cells, meristematic cells are, the meaning of meristem is actively dividing cells. They are highly metabolically active. It means that they have a lot of metabolism going on in them, chemical reactions, and they have a dense cytoplasm. Now these meristematic cells, these cells are the cells which will perform the function of division, and how, because of this division the plant grows. So in embryonic stage all the cells are meristematic. As the plant grows, the meristematic cells they undergo differentiation. Differentiation means the cells, they are undergoing some changes in them. Meristematic cells undergo differentiation and form permanent cells. What are permanent cells? Permanent cells are the cells which may be either living or dead. So can be living or dead. They have lost the ability to divide. So permanent cells are the cells which can be either living or dead, and they have lost the ability to divide. It means that they will not divide, but it does not mean that permanent cells will never divide. When the plant has reached up to a certain growth. So first, what did we see? Embryonic stage. Embryonic stage, all the cells are meristematic. When the plant starts growing a little bit, the cells of the meristem start getting differentiated and they make permanent cells. Now, when the plant has reached some age, it will start secondary growth. We will be discussing them in another video. But when permanent cells, when the plant reaches a certain growth, then the permanent cells they will undergo de-differentiation. The permanent cells will undergo de-differentiation and they will form again meristematic cells. So first, embryonic stage, all the cells are dividing cells. They will build up the plant body. Once the plant body is built, when it grows a little bit, the cells start differentiating into permanent cells. These permanent cells, when the plant reaches some certain growth limit, these cells de-differentiate. De-differentiate means again these cells are differentiating again. They will become from permanent cells to meristematic cells. Now this time the meristematic cells, they will be responsible for the increasing of girth. Increase girth or width of the plant, and these meristematic cells increase the length of the plant. So this was the concept of the tissues in the plants. Now in plants, tissues are of different types. Let us see what are the different types of tissues with the flowchart. In plants, the tissue system is divided into two types. One is meristematic and one is permanent. This is divided on the basis of divisibility. On the basis of divisibility, are the cells divisible or not divisible? Now meristematic cells are divided into three types. Meristematic cells are divided into three types. One is apical, intercalary and lateral. This is divided on the basis of location. Where are meristematic cells present? Apical, intercalary and lateral. Now apical meristem is further divided into two types: root apical and shoot apical. This is also divided on the basis of location. Okay. Now permanent tissues are divided into two types on the basis of complexity. One is simple, one is permanent. Sorry, one is complex. Now simple tissues are of three types. One is parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. This divisibility is on the basis of function. And complex tissues are xylem and phloem. This is also on the basis of function. So this was the flow chart about the tissues in the plants. In plants, there are two types of tissues on the basis of divisibility. One is meristematic tissues and one are permanent tissues. Meristematic tissues are of three types. Meristematic tissues or meristematic cells are the cells which can divide. And permanent are which don't divide. Meristematic cells can be of three types on the basis of their location. Meristematic cells can be either apical meristematic cells, it can be either intercalary meristematic, either cell or tissue, because the group of cells performing a similar function is known as tissue. So intercalary tissues or intercalary cells, and lateral. Now on the basis of location, again apical meristem is of two types. One is root apical meristem and one is shoot apical meristem. And permanent tissues. Permanent tissues are the tissues which do not divide. On the basis of complexity, permanent tissues are of two types. Simple permanent tissues and complex permanent tissue. Now simple permanent tissue, on the basis of function, they are of three types. Parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. Now on the basis of complexity, there is another one that is known as complex permanent tissue. Complex permanent tissue on the basis of functions, they are of two types, xylem and phloem. Now in xylem and phloem also there are different types of cells which we will be discussing when we reach this topic. So now let us start with the first part of the tissue, that is known as the meristematic tissues. Meristematic tissues are the tissues which divide. So let us see. So now let us move on to the first type of tissue system, that is known as meristematic tissue. Meristematic tissue. Now meristematic tissue or meristematic cells both are the same thing. Meristematic tissues are a group of cells which actively perform cell division. Meristematic cells are cells which perform cell division. Similarly, in this anatomy, we will be using mostly cells and tissues both are as same. Now, there is a concept of meristematic tissue. Let us suppose one cell of the meristematic tissue. This is cell. With cell, meristematic. Now, let us suppose this meristematic cell after division forms some cells. These cells are known as primary cells, and the complex of these primary cells is known as primary tissues. This I am talking about the embryonic phase. So this is when it is in embryo. The cells, meristematic cells, after division, they give some cells which are known as primary cells. Primary tissues, they build up the primary plant body. Primary means primary is also represented as 1 degree. This is known as primary plant body, and the primary plant body, it is the initial. Primary means first. So the first form plant body, because in the plants there will be two growth. One is known as primary growth, one is known as secondary growth. So these cells, meristematic cells, they divide and form some primary cells or primary tissues which build up the primary plant body. Now these cells, let us take one cell from that primary cell. This primary cell will undergo differentiation, and this primary cell will undergo differentiation and it will become permanent cell. So these primary cells will undergo differentiation and will form a permanent cell. So now let us just write it over here. Differentiate and form permanent cell, and the complex of this permanent cell is known as permanent tissue. Now let us suppose this permanent cell, tissue, let us suppose. These permanent tissues, these will now de-differentiate and they will form again meristematic tissues. Or meristematic cells. Now in the flowchart we have learned about three types of meristematic cell. One was apical, one was intercalary, and one was lateral. This time the meristematic tissue formed will be lateral. Now the cells of meristematic tissues will again divide. But this time this division will be known as redifferentiation. Redifferentiation. And after redifferentiation, they will form again some cells, and those cells will comprise and form the secondary plant body. So the redifferentiation is known as secondary growth, and this one is known as primary growth. So we understood that meristematic tissues or meristematic cells are the cells which will make the whole plant body. So first there is a meristematic cell in embryo which will divide and form primary cells. Complex is known as primary tissue. Now one of the all the primary tissues will differentiate and form permanent cell. Now this permanent cell will de-differentiate. It means that the differentiation from meristematic cells to permanent, de-differentiation from permanent to back to meristematic cells. These meristematic cells will be lateral meristematic tissues. They will redifferentiate and they will form a secondary plant body, and this redifferentiation is known as secondary growth. Now let us learn about the different types of meristematic tissue. The first type of meristematic tissue is apical meristematic tissue or apical meristematic cells. So the first one is apical. Now this apical can be of two types, root apical and shoot apical. Now root apical cells. Now what are root apical cells? Now these cells are present. Suppose this is the root. So they are present at the tip. Now if you elongate and if you see them, suppose this is the ground, they are present something like this over here. These cells are known as root apical cell. This is the root, and this region has some hairs which are known as root hair. This thing we have discussed in the morphology video, which you can go and check it out. So these are root hair. So root apical cells. How did this root form? First, these root apical cells were just present over here. When the plant was just formed, the cells were present like this. Then what happens is this root apical tissues, they start dividing. Once they divide, they keep on forming the primary plant body. When the primary plant body is being formed, it starts growing. As it is growing downwards, the upper region starts becoming mature, and that mature region is known as the region of maturation. This root apical cell is covered by a thimble-like cap that is known as root cap, which provides it function. Now what are root apical cells? They are present at the tip of root. Root apical cells are present at the tip of the root. They increase the length of root. How do they increase? They keep on dividing, which makes the root go further downward. Present at the tip of root, they increase the length of the root. These are all about the root apical cells. Now there are second type, which is known as shoot apical cells. What are shoot apical cells? Now shoot apical cells, for example, this is the stem. Here or else let it grow a little bit more. This is the stem. This are known as shoot apical meristem. This is actually the stem which goes down and forms the root. So these are known as shoot apical meristem. Now what are these called? These are called leaf primordia or primordium. Now when the apical meristem, suppose first the apical meristem was over here. When it is growing, as it grows, it keeps on leaving some cells over here. See, as the tissue, as the shoot apical meristem, it keeps on dividing. As it is going up, further up, what is happening is the lower portion is becoming matured. It is going up. The plant is growing upwards. So it is present at the distant most region of shoot. Distant most region means at the furthermost region from the ground of the plant is known as the distant most region. Now what it does is it increases the length, or we can say height, of the plant. So as these cells, so let us take these cells over here. These are the meristematic cells. Let us take one cell like this. What it is doing is it is dividing and it is forming some primary cells. These primary cells are going differentiation and forming primary. These are the primary cells which form the primary tissues, and these will differentiate and they will become, this will grow and this will become permanent tissue. So what is happening is the shoot apical meristem is growing in upward direction. As it is going upwards, these cells which are present at the bottom, these cells are becoming matured and they are becoming permanent. But still there are some areas where it is leaving some meristematic tissues. These are called as axillary buds, or actually they are intercalary meristem. What they do is these axillary buds, they will form branches. Here also there is axillary bud which formed a branch like this. So they are responsible for the formation of branches. So this was all about the apical meristem. Now from both of the apical meristem, root apical meristem and shoot apical meristem, what we conclude is, we can conclude that they are responsible for increasing the length of the plant. What is these meristematic tissues? Meristematic tissues are the tissues which are responsible for increasing the length of the plant, and there are of two types: root apical cells and shoot apical cells. Root apical cells present at the tip of the root, they increase the length of the root. Shoot apical cells, they are present at the distant most. Distant most means at the topmost region, and they help in increasing the height of the plant. Now let us move on to the second type of meristematic tissue. So now let us move on to the second type of meristematic tissue, that is known as intercalary tissue. Now what are intercalary tissue? Now when the plant is growing, this is the primordium. Here the apical meristems are present. So as it is growing, these are the mature parts. Mature parts. When it is growing, what it does, it leaves some cells at the mature parts. For example, over here, these are known as intercalary cells. Intercalary meristematic cells. So these intercalary meristematic cells, they are present at the mature parts. Now what they do is, they will help in regenerating the plant parts. Regenerate the plant parts removed by grazing herbivores. So what happens is, this is the stem. So what happens is, when the stem is grown up, when the plant is growing, some parts, for example till here, what if any grazing herbivore came and ate it? Then what happens is, the apical meristem gets destroyed, so the plant won't grow, right? So intercalary cells are these cells which will again form a new branch like this. And when the branch is formed, here the meristematic cells are present. They will again start the growth in this direction. So this is the function of intercalary tissue. They regenerate the plant parts removed by grazing herbivore, and they are present at the nodes. This is an area which is known as node. And what is internode? Internode is the space present between two consecutive nodes. So they are present at the nodes, and they regenerate the plant part which are removed by grazing herbivores. So this was about intercalary tissue. Now the third type of tissue is known as lateral meristematic tissues. The third type is lateral tissue. Now this lateral tissue, we will not be discussing more about lateral tissue in today's video, because these lateral tissues perform secondary growth, and they are present in mature regions of plant stem. They are present in mature regions of plant stem. One more thing, that these lateral tissues are absent in monocots. Monocots, example wheat, rice. Why? Because there is no secondary growth. In monocots. So they perform secondary growth. So as we said that these are the meristematic cells, these will become primary tissues which will differentiate and form permanent cells. These permanent cells will again de-differentiate and form meristematic cells. These meristematic cells will be the lateral meristematic cells, which will again form secondary growth, and they will form the secondary plant part body. This secondary body is absent in monocots because there is no secondary growth in monocots. Have you seen any wheat which has very thick stem? No. It is because they already have a low lifespan. Monocots usually have low lifespan, and lateral tissues are present in dicots, and dicots have usually high lifespan. So because of their high lifespan, they have to survive in the changing conditions. So they need a protective outer covering that is known as secondary wood, which is also known as wood. But if you take monocots, example wheat and rice, they don't have a long lifespan. They have to just survive. They have to reproduce, give the fruits. So they do not have any secondary growth, and if there is no secondary growth, there is no use of lateral tissue in monocots. This was everything about meristematic cells. Now these meristematic cells, this will divide and form some cells which are known as primary plant body, which will mature and form permanent tissue. Now let us discuss about what are the different types of permanent tissue. Let us see. So now let us move on to the second types of tissue, that is known as permanent tissues. Now in permanent tissue there are two types of tissue: simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue. First we will be discussing about simple permanent tissue. Simple permanent tissue. Now what are simple permanent tissue? In simple permanent tissue there are three tissues. One is parenchyma. One is parenchyma, one is collenchyma, and one is sclerenchyma. So let us start with parenchyma. So first, what are the cells of parenchyma? These are the parenchymatous cells. So these are the parenchymatous cells. Now they have nucleus, they have the cytoplasm. So what are parenchymatous cells? First of all, they are the most abundant cells, or we'll say, because mostly permanent tissues are actually forming the plant body, so we'll say they are most abundant tissues. They are generally isodiametric. Isodiametric, it means they may be spherical, oval, polygonal, and elongated. So they may be either spherical, oval, polygonal, or elongated in their shape, and they form the function they perform. The function of photosynthesis. They perform the function of storage. In some cases, they also perform the function of secretion. In some cases, because they are the similarity between parenchyma and colloidal. So they perform photosynthesis, they perform the storage, and in one case or in some cases it also performs buoyancy. The parenchymatous cells which perform the storage of photosynthesis are known as chlorenchyma. The parenchymatous cells which perform the function of buoyancy are known as aerenchyma. These are present in hydrophytes. Hydrophytes are the plants which are present in the water. So they are the most abundant tissue. They are isodiametric, they may be spherical, oval, polygonal, or elongated. They perform photosynthesis, storage, buoyancy, and here one more point, intercellular space may be present or absent. So as you can see over here, these are intercellular spaces. And one more thing, that their cell wall are made up of cellulose. So their cell walls are made up of cellulose. These things are made up of cellulose. They have intercellular spaces. These are parenchymatous cells. They are most abundant tissues. If you see the plant body, in the areas except where there is no hardness, in the areas where there is no hardness and there is no need to perform any mechanical support or structural support, in those areas parenchymatous cells are present. They are most abundant. They are isodiametric. It means that they are similar. I mean, their diameter is same. They are symmetrical. Spherical, oval, polygonal, or elongated. They perform photosynthesis, storage, and buoyancy. And intercellular space may be present or absent. In most of the cases, it is present. And cell walls are made up of cellulose. They have cellulosic cell walls. This was the first type. Now, the second type of simple permanent cell are known as collenchyma. So, the second type is collenchyma. So, what are collenchymatous cells? So, let us draw the diagram first. These are the collenchymatous cells and they have a layer. Which are cornered, which are thickened at the corners, something like this. These thickenings play an important role. So these are the cells of collenchyma. So what are the properties of these cells? They are living. Even the parenchymatous cells were living. This thing is the point. They are living and perform mechanical support. They are living and provide mechanical support and also perform photosynthesis. So it means that they are green in color. Collenchyma are the living cells and provide mechanical support. This is a very important question. Which of these cells are living and provide mechanical function? So they are collenchymatous cells and they are thickened at the corners. These thickened corners are made up of cellulose, hemicellulose and pectin. And at the corners, cellulose, hemicellulose and pectin are present, and it is covered by a layer of pectin. So it is usually covered by pectin, but at the corners there is thickening due to cellulose, hemicellulose and pectin. So the majority covering is provided by pectin. And they are chlorophyllous. It means that they have chlorophyll. They can perform the function of photosynthesis. They are present at tender areas, or you can say growing areas, which require support. Example, leaf tendril. So, for example, this is the leaf. The collenchyma are present over here. These collenchyma are green in color. If you see the tendril of a leaf, it is also green in color, and they perform the function of protection. They perform the function of mechanical support. And because of this collenchymatous tissue, due to the wind, the leaf will also flutter and it will not break from the branch. So this is because of collenchyma. And one more important point, intercellular spaces are absent. It means that there is no intercellular spaces between them. So they even have cytoplasm, but there is very low cytoplasm. So they are living and they provide mechanical support and also perform photosynthesis. They are thickened at the corner due to the deposition of cellulose, hemicellulose and pectin. And they are present in growing areas which require support. For example, leaf tendril. Over here, it provides the function of photosynthesis and mechanical support. And intercellular spaces are absent. This was all about collenchyma. Now the next one is sclerenchyma, the last type of simple permanent tissue, sclerenchyma. So what is sclerenchyma? Sclerenchyma or sclerenchymatous cells, the first and foremost most important thing is that they are dead. Sclerenchyma. First important point is they are dead. They are of two types. One is fiber and one is scleroid. They have pits. I'll explain everything. Pits are present. They perform only mechanical support. And they are dead, so they perform only mechanical support. They are present at seed coat of pulses. Seed coat of pulses. They are also present in fruits like guava, sapota, and they provide grittiness. So if you see guava, if you cut the guava and if you see, they are a little bit hard. Why? Because of sclerenchymatous tissue. And even if you see sapota, they are a little bit hard and gritty. So it means that there is a presence of sclerenchyma. Now there are two different types of sclerenchyma. One is something like this, which has thick walls, These are known as pits. And this type of sclerenchyma is known as a fiber. And there is one more type that is like this. These are known as sclerites. So these are known as sclerites. And these are also pits. So this is about fiber and this is about sclerite. So the space in between them, this space is known as lumen. They both have highly thickened walls. Their walls are very thickened. Even sclerites, these are all the thickened walls. These are sclerites and these are fibers. So they are dead. They have fibers. They can be of two types. One is fiber and sclerite. There are pits. What is the function of pits? Pits are actually basically they perform the in and out of the fluid, which provides the nutrition. But they are dead actually, and they perform only mechanical support. Being dead, they perform mechanical support. That is, they help in keeping the plant parts straight. Present in seed coat of pulses, fruits like guavas and sapotas, and they provide the grittiness to the plant. So this was all about sclerenchyma. Sclerenchymas are also present in nuts. So this was about simple permanent tissue. Now let us move on to the second type of permanent tissue, that is known as complex permanent tissue. Let us see. So now let us move on to the second type of permanent tissue, which are known as complex permanent tissue. Complex permanent tissue. So one more point, that sclerenchyma are actually thickened because of the presence of lignin. Lignin is actually a fat, and it is also even a fat carbohydrate, but mostly we consider it as a fat. So lignin, because of lignin provides the mechanical support. Lignin provides the strength to the sclerenchymatous tissue. Now let us move on to complex permanent tissue. Now simple and complex. Simple permanent tissues are the tissues which have cells which are of only one type. So we saw parenchyma, we saw sclerenchyma, we saw collenchyma. All these cells were similar in structure. But now here in complex permanent tissue, more than one type of cells, they will form tissues, and which help in the function of they perform a single function. So complex permanent tissue, first one we will be learning about xylem. Now xylem has four parts. One trachea, one vessel, xylem, parenchyma, and xylem fibers. Now tracheids, vessels, xylem, parenchyma, and xylem fibers. Xylem fibers are sclerenchymatous. Xylem parenchyma are parenchymatous. Tracheids are also sclerenchymatous. And vessels are also sclerenchymatous. So with this what we conclude, that xylem fibers, vessels and tracheid. So fibers, vessels and tracheids, they are dead. Only xylem parenchyma is a living one. Okay, so tracheid, xylem, parenchyma, vessel and xylem fibers. So what are tracheids? Tracheids are elongated tube-like structures, and vessels. So they both look a little bit similar, but the thing is, tracheids and vessels are actually different, because vessels have a opening at the top like this, and pits are also present, because it is a sclerenchyma. Pits are present, and these are the perforations. Now there is a difference between perforation and pit. Perforation is actually an opening which is present at the ends, and pits are present all over the body surface of these cells. This is actually a vessel. But if you see tracheids, in tracheids only pits are present like this. Now what are the functions? Now the function of xylem fiber is definitely support. The function of trachete is also a support. The function of vessel is actually conduction. Conduction. What does the xylem do? Xylem performs the function of conduction of water from the water and minerals from the root to the different parts of the plant. So xylem has 4 cells. One is xylem fiber, vessel, tracheids and xylem parenchyma. Xylem parenchyma has the function of storage. Storage of what? Storage of nutrition. So there is one more point, that there are even rays, medullary rays, or we call them as radial xylems. So what is the function? Radial xylem. Radial means a star shape. Radial means present at the, for example, if you consider this as the stem, radial means present at the radius. So when the xylem brings water from the ground to the upper parts, even the corners need some water. So due to the radial cells, what happens is the water is absorbed from the xylem and is provided to the different types of cells. Like if you see over here, this is the cross section of a stem. So xylem passes like this. Xylem is going upward, but even these cells needs, even these cells need water and minerals, right? So what they do is, there are some radial cells which take water from the xylem and they provide to the different parts of the stem. So this is about xylem. Tracheids. What are tracheids? They are long elongated structures which are helping in support of the plant. What are xylem fiber? They are also skeleton diameters. They are also dead. They provide support. What is vessel? Now vessel is the main conducting element. So what happens is, vessel, we usually call it as a vessel element. What is a vessel element? So many vessels. This is one vessel element which has perforations. This is another vessel element, and this is another vessel element. So water from the root reaches the top due to these vessels only. They have perforations. Perforations, it means that there are some small openings at the ends. So due to which the water plus mineral is known as sap. The sap flows from the root to the different parts of the plant. So this was about vessel, which vessel element. The single one is known as vessel element, and combined fully is known as a vessel. The vessel is also made up of skeleton chyma. There is one more thing, that the vessels, the cells which are dead, they perform the function of conduction. They have the property of storing the water only if they are dead. Then we have xylem parenchyma. They store the nutrition. They store the food for the xylems. So this was all about the first type of complex parenchyma permanent tissue, that is xylem. Now this xylem is also of 2 types. Now as we learned that one is known as primary growth, one is known as secondary growth. So what is primary growth? When the meristematic cells do division and they form some cells. Those are known as primary cells which form primary tissues. And the plant body formed by the primary tissues is known as primary plant body. When the primary plant body is formed, the xylems are also formed. And one more point, that in gymnosperms, vessels is absent. So there is no vessel in gymnosperm. So we say that in gymnosperms the mechanical support is provided mostly by xylem fibers. So there is no vessel in gymnosperms. Now there are 2 types of xylem. One type of xylem is known as primary xylem. And one type is known as secondary xylem. Now primary xylem. In primary xylem also there are 2 xylems. One proto-xylem, one is meta-xylem. And secondary xylem is another different kind of xylem. So primary xylem. What is primary xylem? Primary xylem are the xylem which are formed during the primary growth. So primary xylem, proto-xylem and meta-xylem. Proto-xylem is the first formed xylem. When the zygote is becoming into a plant, so the first formed xylem is proto-xylem. After some time the plant is growing. Plant grows one more time, even not a secondary growth. We are not saying secondary growth. In a primary growth only, as the plant is growing, the need of water is also increasing. So we need to perform again some cell division. And after that cell division, the xylem which is formed is known as meta-xylem. So this metaxylem and protoxylem both are the plant of a primary plant body, that is primary xylem. After some times when the plant grows up a lot, then it needs secondary growth. So that time the cells are formed as secondary xylem. So now there are two conditions. One, now suppose, what is this? This is a transection. So this is the root, right? You are cutting the root like this and you are seeing it. Anatomy means study of internal structure. So the center part is known as pith. We'll be discussing in detail when we learn about the anatomy of roots. So the center part is known as pith. When protoxylem is towards inside and metaxylem towards periphery, it is known as endarch. No, when the protoxylem is, it is known as endar. This endar condition is found in stems. So suppose this is the stem, then what happens is the protoxylems are actually large cells. No, protoxylems are actually smaller cells. Metaxylem are large cells. So when the protoxylem is towards the pith and the metaxylem is towards the outside, periphery, this condition is known as endar condition. This is found only in stems. And when protoxylem is towards outside and metaxylem inside, this is known as exarch condition, which is found in roots. So imagine when protoxylem is towards outside, metaxylem inside. Metaxylem is later formed, protoxylem is first formed. So from outside to inside the growth is happening. From outside to inside, this growth is called as centripetal growth. And here the metaxylem is towards outside and the protoxylem is towards the inside. So from inside to outside the growth is happening. This type of growth is called centrifugal growth. Okay. So centrifugal force is the force which allows the body to, which experience the force which pushes the body towards the outside, and centripetal is the force which brings the body towards the inner side of a circle. So inner side means from outer to inner, and the growth is happening from outer side to inner side because the protoxylem is towards the outer side. So that is centripetal. It is found in roots. This exarch condition is found in roots. Endar condition is found in stems. So this was about first type of complex permanent tissue, xylem. Let us move on to the second type, that is known as phloem. So now let us move on to the second part of complex permanent tissue, that is known as phloem. Now the phloem also has four parts. First part of phloem is known as companion cell. Second part is known as sieve tube or sieve elements. Third part is phloem fiber, and the fourth part is phloem parenchyma. Now companion cells, sieve tube, phloem fiber and phloem parenchyma. Companion cells are parenchymatous, sieve tubes are parenchymatous, phloem fibers are sclerenchymatous and phloem parenchyma are parenchymatous. So it means that these three are living and this alone is dead. So in xylem only one was alive and all the three were dead. In phloem only one is dead and other three are alive. Now companion cells and sieve tubes. So let us start with these two because these two are always found together. Now suppose these are the sieve tubes. These sieve tubes have some perforations at the ends. Perforation. What is the function of phloem? Phloem's function is to transport the nutrients from the leaf to the different part of the plants. So with this is one element. This is known as sieve tube element. Now with this sieve tube element there is attached one cell. This is known as companion cell. There are some poles between them. These are known as plasmodesmatal connection. Plasmodesmatal connections. So what happens is, the sieve tube elements, they do not have nucleus. Sieve tube elements do not have nucleus, but still they are considered as living. But if they do not have nucleus, why are they considered as living? There is one more example like this, that is our red blood cell. Our red blood cell also do not have nucleus, but still they are considered as living. They are able to perform the function. Every function which a living thing does, even the sieve tube elements does. There is even metabolism in sieve tube elements. Cytoplasm is present in sieve tube elements. Just the nucleus. So that is why companion cells, companion means a friend. So these cells are always found with the sieve tube elements. So the nucleus of companion cell controls the sieve tube cells. What is the function of companion cell? It maintains pressure gradient or osmolality gradient in sieve cells. So these help in maintaining the pressure gradient in sieve tube cells. So this nucleus takes a control of the sieve tube elements. And why are these plasmodesmatal connections? It is because if there is no connection between them, how will the companion cell even help the sieve tube elements? So this was all about companion cells and sieve tubes. Companion cells and sieve tubes. One more point is, in gymnosperms, companion cells and sieve tubes are absent. Instead of companion cells, they have albuminous cells. And instead of sieve tubes, they have sieve cells. In gymnosperms. So in gymnosperms, there is no companion cell, they have albuminous cells. They also, there is one more thing, that vessels and companion cells and sieve tubes, this is sieve tube, okay? Sieve cells are separate one. See, sieve tube elements, if you take more and more elements like this, they will also become a tube. So together they are known as tube. Even vessel, if you take many vessels together and if you attach them, align them, then they form a tube. So that is known as vessel. And each element of the vessel is known as a vessel element. Here, it is a single cell is known as a sieve tube element, and combined is known as a sieve tube. So here, sieve tubes and companion cells are absent in the gymnosperms. Now talking about phloem fiber. Phloem fiber is also known as bast fiber. Bast fiber. They are absent in monocots. Why? Because they are found after secondary growth, and there is no secondary growth in monocots. So they are absent in the monocots. These bast fibers are used for making ropes. They can be of jute, hemp, and flax. Jute, hemp, and flax. Their phloem fiber are very strong, and they are sclerenchymatous. So it means they are dead, and sclerenchyma means strength. So they are strong. They are called as bast fibers. These bast fibers are used for making ropes, and the ropes are from jute, hemp, and flax. Now we have phloem parenchyma. Phloem parenchyma are the parenchymatous cells which store the food. Even now in phloem also there are two types of phloem: primary and secondary phloem. So even not companion cells, if you talk about collenchyma is also absent in roots. Why they are absent in roots? Because collenchyma performs the function of protection, mechanical function, and also photosynthesis. Xylem is already made up of many types of sclerenchyma. We learned that xylem is made up of vessel, brackets, xylem fiber. All these three are sclerenchymatous. So it already has the function of mechanical support. And collenchyma is needed where it is performing photosynthesis. Root is being underground, it does not need any collenchyma. So collenchyma is absent in roots. Now, and one more thing, that endarch condition is found even in leaves. And leaves and stem, the endarch condition is found. Now here primary and secondary phloem. Primary phloem is the phloem which is formed by the primary division. Primary phloem is also of two types. One is protophlloem and one is metaphlloem. Here arrangement does not matter because the arrangement of xylem is something which matters. And secondary phloem is formed during the secondary growth. So this was all about phloem. Companion cells are usually attached with the sieve tube so that they can help in maintaining the pressure gradient of the sieve tubes. Sieve tubes are the conducting elements. The conducting elements in xylem are known as vessels, and the conducting element in phloem is known as sieve tube. So conducting, it means that they help in the transportation. So phloem fibers are strong, they are known as bast fiber, used for making ropes, and phloem parenchyma are the cells which perform the function of storage of food. So this was all about phloem. Now there is one more topic which I said in the starting, that is tissue system, but we won't be able to cover tissue system today. In the next video we'll be learning separately about tissue system. That will be a small video, and after that we'll be learning about the anatomy of the dicot roots, dicot stems, monocot root, monocot stems and leaves also. So that time we'll be learning the transverse section. So I hope you have enjoyed today's video. In today's video we learned about what is anatomy, what are tissue, what are the types of tissues in the plants. We learned about simple tissue, complex tissue. In simple tissue we learned about parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. In complex tissue we learned about xylem and phloem. So I hope you have enjoyed today's video. If you enjoyed this video, like this video, subscribe to this channel if you are new. See you next time in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.